of total insanity. Let's welcome Tony D'Angelo.
All right, the man, myth, legend known as Tony D. You can follow him on Twitter, Tony D'Angelo7 at Twitter. It's a great follow. He is working constantly behind the scenes, all kinds of different investigative reports that he is pouring over. But again, Tony, first let me start by saying thank you again for all that you do, and good morning.
Good morning, Lee Elci. Good morning, everybody, and especially proud to be among you today.
So it was interesting. I got an email sent to me late last night, and then I forwarded it to you, which, again, lo and behold, Semaphore decides to make some changes within their structure.
I'm sitting here this morning, and I'm thinking, I'm not in this stratosphere, but I get an idea how, John the Baptist felt. Only thing is I don't have the wild honey and the locusts and all of that. But, when you're crying and you're crying and you're crying and, you're watching a train wreck, literally, and, no one really reacts to that, at least to the degree that they should. There was a story last night that Semaphore closed its Connecticut labs, cutting probably somewhere between maybe 500 jobs globally. And in a predictable kind of scenario to what's gone on before. Now, before you get into what the politicians will say or the state-run media will say, let's just take a good, hard look at what happened here. Let's just, I'm through with the pretenses, especially after last Tuesday. Now, this is the cost that we all pay for issues not propounded and fights that we need to fight in this state. Connecticut's wonderful. It either fights the wrong fight or no fight at all. It's legendary. But let's look to see what happened. Why are we on the hoof once again? We gave this company $45 million. Look it up on the state checkbook. Now, it was the no-bid contract for COVID testing. They don't like to talk about the $250 a pop for the secretive whole genome sequencing. That wasn't mentioned anywhere other than here and a couple of other places. I've got the contracts for that. To the extent there was family profit, in the Lamont camp, and there was on game day, there was, Annie's 2 and 20 commission in the hedge funds and things like that. That went off to partnerships in the Cayman Islands, the tax-free secret Cayman Islands. Only a couple of people talked to that. One thing dawned on me last night, Lee Elci, and stop and think about this. Let's just get away from the stupidity of politics and state-run media and spin and all this other stuff. If you've got a monopoly on a product, I don't care what it is, if you've got a monopoly and you're the only person in town doing this, as a matter of fact, you've rigged the decks so that you are the only person in town being a COVID test, and then when other competitors enter the market, you kind of say, well, there's other people out there who are doing this stuff, and, we don't need to do this anymore. I mean, you got to wonder about the quality of the product of the originator, because you had the market and you just said, nah, I didn't do it, So, I mean, that to me, as far as a business decision, if you're number one in something, you fight to stay number one, especially if you've got a leg up. I mean, it's a good question. We never knew, and we never know about, and we never can hear about the efficacy of these tests. I mean, it has me suspect. Now, we screamed, we yelled for at least a half a year or 2.5 years saying this is a pump and dump. These are people that got in early, that loaded up, that bought the press and all this other kind of stuff. And the minute the state revenue started flowing, we watched the whole thing crash and burn. Now, I will, I look at this and I say to myself, I have been screaming on this show, torch the DECD. Investigate the DECD. This is millions of dollars going out unaccountable to things like this, family entities. We prop this thing up so a blessed few could get their hands on it, and we haven't seen anyone Republican. I mean, call it for what it is. Bob Stefanowski said at a business forum, we need more David Lehmans. David Lehman is the head of DECD. I mean, let me just tell you one other thing here. I can go on for days and days and days, and believe me, I don't want to. It's not fun to kick a corpse. But They had $15.5 million out. Okay, no accountability. They just go ahead. Hey, this is great. We're going to put it in the paper. We're these wonderful people. We're saving the state from ruin. The first $4.5 million, we went through this on this show. Basically, for forgiveness of that loan, all you had to do to show up and get that forgiven was a pulse. They gave you the money to pay the people to keep them employed, to prop the thing up. And then there's $12 million remaining. Now, this we didn't hear. We heard about it on this show. We didn't hear about it anywhere else. And, a couple of other blessed souls, like our pal George, talked about it. And, a 2% sweetheart loan, 2% for millions of dollars. And not only that, Mount Sinai, who was guaranteeing this loan, I got the paperwork on this. You can't say it doesn't happen, people. They removed the guarantee. Hey, you guys are off the hook. So once again, our political system fails us. Once again, the taxpayers are on the hook for this stuff. I just have two words flashing through my brain this morning. God forgive me, it's terrible, but you stink. I mean, how stupid can we possibly be? This is unbelievable.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about some of the things you said.
Go right ahead.
Pump and dump. I want to know, do you know or can we find out how much of Semaphore the governor's wife had in the beginning and then how much she had at the very end? The reason why I bring that up is because, when I actually had the opportunity to talk to Ned, and he came and gave me a pop-in visit, and then we had a very non-cordial 5-minute conversation on the air that was supposed to be 20 when I asked him about Semaphore, and he ran out the door. His response to me was, "Well, look where the stock is right now." So my question is, can we find that out? Can we see if she owned X amount in month 1 and then Y amount in the last month? Do we have any idea of that or no?
Public securities sales are difficult to ascertain. They know the field they play in. Couple that with, holdings in an offshore entity, which is like totally secret. Nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows what's being shorted. Nobody knows what's being countered. I mean, no idea. Okay. I mean, you can patch into what they had on game day, at least that much. And the other thing is, we could see it happening. Now, what our illustrious state-run media and our candidates never, ever, ever probed that we did was Ned to walk in and turn his pockets out. And especially now he's going to say, well, look, the thing was worthless. Don't blame me. But there's different kinds of profit, people.
Right.
There's the profit that you get from operations. Yes, Semaphore operations, if the financial statements were truthful, there's lawsuits right now that will hopefully bring that out. But, weren't that hot. But there's profit from selling, and also in the hedge fund industry, you get a commission for what you're holding and then 20% of the increase. That's all unascertainable. But no one ever really probed that other than us. So I wish we could get honestly, truthfully, I think the only way you get an ascertainment of that is these people who have done it finally say, okay, this is what we've done.
Right.
I mean, short of a federal investigation, I don't know. I mean, obviously the political system's failed us on this.
No question about that. All right, then my second question, you made an interesting point, one I never even thought about, since that they were the only game in town.
The only game in town.
Then they could, basically the product that they were producing could be subpar and nobody would know the difference. I totally agree with that. A lot of people were either getting these tests or what have you, and the results were so botched or so wrong or broken. That happens so many different times. Like one day a person would get a positive test and then literally the next day it'd be negative, or negative, then the next day it would be positive. It happened, I know at least a dozen people where that happened to multiple times during the course of this COVID. So, I mean, the test that they were giving us, was it a big giant waste of everybody's time?
Well, and it's strange credulity to say once other people get in, when you're number one in a market, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You don't have competitors. But when you have competitors, you've got two choices. Then again, you've got the market. You've got a very compliant Department of Health. You could either A, get better, or B, hey, I'm a sham, I'm going to pull back. And I mean, or I'm not going to be able to compete with people who will do these tests accurately and do them at less cost. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be an innovator? I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable. And these questions, other than here, and perhaps maybe not even today, have never been asked. And I shouldn't say never, but rarely.
Tony D'Angelo is our guest on Tuesdays. He's been with us for quite a while. We're lucky to have him. Tony D'Angelo 7 on Twitter is how you follow him.
I'm lucky to have you guys.
So, real losers. You want to get into that?
Well, there was an election. Republican Party lost. We had two choices. We had, abysmal, abominable, and we're now living in that world, and we had somewhat better. And the people that really lost was not the Republican Party, but the people in the state of Connecticut are the biggest losers. And that's the thing that, I think of all the people, of all the things that were, that are done wrong, the kids in school, the businesses closed, I can go on and on about that, but I don't know. And maybe I'm not really bright, maybe I don't get everything, but I don't know how you have a fight without having a fight. Every single thing in this state, anything you give me can somehow point to Ned's corruption. I mean, and how you sort of leave that out there, and people saying, well, Ned's a good guy, and he, I don't believe he's corrupt, and I've heard this in several places, and I'm like, well, okay, you've got you have the DPH, you got the tests on the tarmac that never were, you've got the whole COVID semaphore thing, you've got the nonprofits we've gone through, you've got the whole thing with zoning. That's only the tip of the iceberg, let me tell you. There's a whole back nine of that's coming down the pipe. I saw it when I was in California. It's coming here. We'll get into that. DECD, I mean, I can go on and on and on and on. And, this was not there. And you say to yourself, well, what's the difference? We can't win. Well, I think there's a victory, because there's a whole lot of people that were in the middle, because I would talk to them. I still talk to them. They are my friends. And they looked and they said, what's the difference here? What is the difference between what the Republicans are doing and what the Democrats are doing? And, I get that, because, there wasn't a big enough chasm between the two. Now, when you look at that, it's a situation where I think, if you look at Carrie Lake, okay, now she is certified to be the loser in Arizona, right, but she lost by a little bit. I mean, I think you win by being aggressive and proving something, as opposed to saying, well, okay, here we are once again. And, where this situation has just I think just failed us terribly. I don't know where we go from here, only other than to say that the same thing clearly cannot work.
Well, no, I don't think it can work. I don't know what to do here in the state of Connecticut. We were talking briefly off the air. It's like you don't want to shrug your shoulders. You don't want to crawl into a fetal position and give up. You want to punch back. You want to fight back. But it's like anything else. Where am I swinging? Who am I punching at? What, and is there people behind me? Am I doing this by myself? And do the people behind me, or does anybody really want me to swing back? Look at what's remarkable to me about this election too, Tony, is the amount that people lost by. Like Bob ran, I thought, a good campaign. I mean, maybe not as aggressive as some people might have wanted, or maybe he didn't do this or didn't do that. But compared to the first time, it was light years better. And he loses by 150,000 votes, 100,000 votes more than he lost by last time. I can't explain that. Can you?
I think it's losing the majority of people who are in that subset, if you will, which I think is a good part of the state that aren't political but want to have freedom and education and the rights protected, and to be very clear about that, and to see really what is a corrupted and inept state bureaucracy be dealt with so that they can live their lives. They're not political people. Many people have come out during the pandemic who never, myself, who never really considered themselves to be advocates for anything, but when you start cutting into the fibers of our being, saying the political system is going to be the savior of us all, that block of people, if you will, I think is entirely lost.
You know what's funny? You just made me think of something. So clearly, in this state at least, the Republican Party is essentially a lost cause, right? There's really a rudderless boat that has no direction. So why hang on to it? Like, why hang on to it with both hands? Because it's the only life raft that's out there? Maybe create something different. I know that sounds crazy, and I know other people have sort of tried to do that, independent party or what, this, that, the other, libertarian. But we talk about this all the time, how people have been in power for 40, 50 years and don't get anything done. Well, guess what? Here in Connecticut, you guys have been the short end of the straw for 50 years. Yet you're not getting it done. So either change the mindset to something that's more palatable to people, or let's find something new.
And that's basically what it comes down to. It either works or it doesn't. And when we're going to have a little bit better bad or a marginally better bad, that's not solving anything.
Exactly.
That's not saving anything. You know, and where I think we're going to, and this is just, I mean, you think it ends with semaphore. It's just beginning. And this is a failure of government, a failure of acuity, a failure of candidates to say what I am going to do to straighten out this fiscal mess, which is dragging us into the muck every single day. This whole thing with Samuel Bankman-Fried, which is starting right now, and this whole thing with his hedge fund, FTX, there are direct ties here, this whole crypto universe, to the digital currency group. That group of people, we broke the story. Everybody took credit for it, but we broke the story, a year ago that, this is a Lamont equity coming in to Stanford, and they're going to bring this whole future of digital currency to us, and, heck, we better get with it. And, one of the subsidiaries of the digital currency is a entity called, and I wrote it down, let me just bear with me for just a second. This is an entity called Samuel Bankman-Fried. Anyway, I'll put it up on the I'll put it up on the stream. But basically, this sub entity of Digital Currency Group was owed $175 million from Samuel Bankman-Fried, and Digital Currency Group wrote the check, and they said, okay, we're going to make you whole. Now, my question is, again, we have no controls. How much of our state money is tied into this mess? We don't know. This is great. This is business development. This is jobs. And I mean, this to me is probably the biggest sewer that goes on from day to day to day. People can't make it on the simplest things, but yet your ruling class just goes ahead and says they're going to, make things wonderful. And this is only the tip of this iceberg. We're going to look into that a little bit next week. We kind of ran out of time, but it's just over and over and over. It's to the point where, believe me, it's like my head explodes.
The one thing I think I'm going to take away from this election more than anything else is that in Connecticut and even across the country, apparently for the voters, character no longer counts, Tony. Character does not count. And, you can try to run campaigns based on being somebody who is driven by what's right as opposed to what is wrong, but that doesn't seem like it matters. That's, I think, maybe the scariest thing that I take away from all of it.
Yeah, I mean, you have people now talking about Fetterman for president. Can you imagine?
Oh, it's insane.
Can you absolutely imagine? I mean, it's like if you want to make a mock of government and stand there and not scream and cry out for everything that has gone on in America, for all the good that has happened, not that all of it has been good, but it's a free society. We can speak out. We can do things. We can make our own way. And this is what you're going to come to. We've got a serious problem here that I don't think a lot of people are really considering.